coughing up blood, abandoned alien Princess Freya waited to die alone as the space battle between humans and her people raged until Terran pilot Frank Holmes did something unthinkable, hurtling through the cosmos to her rescue. Eliani energy blast slammed into the Earth fighter ships, bursting them like popcorn, as the massive warship Odin's Wrath cruised through the carnage. Crown Prince Odin lounged in his command chair, watching his ships tear the United Earth Federation fleet to shreds. "Prince Odin, we've lost contact with your sister's shuttle. She's been hit." Odin shrugged. "Her sacrifice serves the Eliani. Focus fire on their capital ships. I want this done." As Eliani disruptors boiled through ship hulls and cooked Terran bodies inside, one human had seen enough death. Lieutenant Frank Holmes punched his afterburners, spinning out of formation and blasting through the hell of weapons fire toward a blip on his targeting screen, an Eliani shuttle venting atmosphere and running on backup power. A single life form pulsed weakly inside. Frank's commander screamed at him to return and defend the fleet. Frank shut off the comm. He was going to save this alien no matter the cost, because Terrans didn't abandon people to die cold and alone in space, forgotten amidst the fire and blood. Not even an enemy. Frank carefully docked with the Eliani shuttle airlock. He didn't know if he was too late. He didn't know if this alien would kill him the moment he stepped inside. All he knew was that he had to try, because that was what humans did. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of escaping atmosphere. Frank stepped into the Eliani shuttle and saw her, Princess Freya, her purple blood pooling around her crumpled form. She looked up at him with pain-filled eyes, the first human she had ever seen. "It will be okay," Frank said gently, scooping her into his arms. "I've got you now." With the Eliani princess secure in his ship, Frank took off, pushing his engines to the max to reach the UEF medical frigate before it was too late. Laser blasts and plasma bursts lit up the void around him like apocalyptic fireworks as Frank dodged and jinked. All that mattered was getting Freya to safety. Because he would not fail her as her own brother had. Frank didn't care that he would likely be court-martialed for this. He didn't care that this alien was his sworn enemy. She was hurt, she needed help, and no one was going to stop him from doing what was right. Not Crown Prince Odin. Not even the entire Eliani fleet. Today, for once, human compassion would win. Today they would make it out of this hell. Together. Frank's fighter roared into the atmosphere of Zephyr Prime, the unconscious princess secured in the cramped rear compartment. As he approached the UEF medical facility, a squad of military police intercepted his ship, weapons trained on the cockpit. "Lieutenant Holmes, land immediately and surrender yourself for arrest." A stern voice crackled over the comms. Frank complied, setting down on the landing pad. The moment his canopy opened, the MPs yanked him from the cockpit and slapped on restraints. "The princess, she needs medical attention now," Frank yelled as they dragged him away. Medics rushed to the ship, carefully extracting Freya's limp form and racing her into the facility. In the operating room, Dr. David Shue scrubbed in, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I want her vitals stabilized and blood transfusion started stat," he barked at his team. "I don't care if she's the enemy, we have a duty to help." As Dr. Shue worked to save Freya's life, Frank found himself before his commanding officer, the iron-jawed Colonel John Rutgers. The colonel glared at Frank from behind his desk, hands clasped tightly. "Lieutenant, your actions today are a disgrace to the uniform. Disobeying direct orders, aiding and abetting an enemy combatant. I have no choice but to place you under arrest to await court-martial." "Sir, I couldn't just leave her to die out there," Frank protested. "Isn't that what we're fighting for, to be better than them?" Colonel Rutgers' expression hardened. "What we are fighting for is to win this war, Lieutenant, and your little stunt may have cost us dearly. Get him out of my sight." As the MPs led Frank to the brig, alarms suddenly blared throughout the base. The ground shook with distant explosions. Zephyr Prime was under attack. Eliani warships darkened the skies, disgorging swarms of fighters and troop transports. The UEF defenders scrambled to respond, but they were hopelessly outmatched by the technologically superior Eliani forces. Laser fire and plasma blasts lit up the air, turning the once peaceful colony into a raging inferno. Leading the assault was Crown Prince Odin himself, his face twisted with rage as he oversaw the destruction. "Burn this pathetic planet to ashes," he snarled. "I want my sister back and the Terran scum who took her to suffer for their insolence." In the chaos of the attack, Frank managed to slip away from his captors, stealing a rifle and fighting his way through the rubble-strewn streets towards the medical facility. He had to get to Freya before Odin did. Bursting into the operating room, Frank found Dr. Shu and his team huddled over Freya's unconscious form, even as explosions rocked the building. "We have to move her somewhere safe," Frank urged. "The Eliani are here for her, and they'll kill us all to get what they want." Dr. Shu hesitated for only a moment before nodding in agreement. Working together, they carefully transferred Freya to a mobile life support unit. As they raced through the collapsing facility, dodging falling debris and enemy fire, Frank couldn't help but reflect on the strange twists of fate that had brought him here, risking everything to protect an alien princess he had been fighting only hours before. But looking down at Freya's pale, vulnerable face, Frank knew he had made the right choice. Somehow they would find a way through this together. They had to. Because the alternative was too terrible to imagine, for both their worlds. The sounds of battle grew closer, plasma blasts and laser fire echoing through the ruined streets surrounding the medical facility. Frank peered out from behind a shattered window, his heart pounding as he watched the approaching Eliani forces. He knew they had to act fast. Turning to Dr. Shu, Frank spoke urgently. "We need to move her now. The Eliani will be here any minute." The doctor nodded grimly, already preparing Freya's life support unit for transport. Frank pulled out his communicator, punching in a familiar code. "Jack, it's Frank. I need your help." Captain Jack Hawkins' gruff voice crackled through the device. "I'm a little busy here, Frank. The Eliani are tearing this place apart." "I know, but I've got the Eliani princess. We need to get her out of here and negotiate a ceasefire with Prince Odin. It's our only chance." There was a pause, then Jack replied, "All right, I'm on my way. I'll bring my team. We'll get you out." Minutes later, Jack and his squad burst into the medical facility, weapons at the ready. Sergeant Sarah Thompson, her sniper rifle slung over her shoulder, took up a defensive position near the entrance. Corporal Mike Lee, carrying a pack laden with explosives, moved to assist Dr. Shu with Freya's life support unit. "We've got a plan," Jack said, his face smeared with dirt and blood. "Sarah will provide cover fire while Mike sets up a diversion. Then we'll make a run for the old industrial district. There's a network of tunnels there that should get us past the Eliani lines." Frank nodded, gripping his rifle tightly. "Let's do it." As Sarah laid down a barrage of precision shots, Mike rigged a series of explosive charges around the perimeter of the facility. The ground shook with the force of the blasts, sending chunks of rubble flying and creating a thick cloud of dust and smoke. Under cover of the chaos, the group made their move, hustling through the debris-strewn streets with Freya's life support unit in tow. Eliani patrols soon spotted them, plasma bolts sizzling past as they ducked and weaved through the ruins. Sarah dropped to one knee, her rifle cracking as she picked off Eliani soldiers with deadly accuracy. Mike lobbed grenades, the explosions buying them precious seconds to push forward. As they neared the entrance to the tunnels, an Eliani scout party emerged from a collapsed building, weapons blazing. The squad took cover, returning fire in a blistering exchange. Suddenly Mike cried out in pain, a plasma bolt searing through his leg. He collapsed, his face twisted in agony. "Mike's hit," Sarah shouted, dragging him to safety behind a broken wall. Frank looked to Jack, desperation etched on his face. They were so close, but with Mike wounded and the Eliani closing in, he knew they couldn't all make it. "Jack, you and Sarah get Mike out of here. There's a UEF stronghold a few clicks east. They'll have medical facilities." "What about you?" Jack asked, already hefting Mike onto his shoulders. Frank glanced at Freya, her face pale and still within the life support unit. I have to get her to Prince Odin. It's the only way to stop this. Jack clasped Frank's shoulder, his eyes hard with understanding. You're a damn fool, Frank, but you're doing the right thing. We'll buy you as much time as we can. With a final nod, Jack and Sarah disappeared into the tunnels, Mike's blood leaving a grim trail behind them. Frank turned to Freya, his jaw set with determination. Looks like it's just you and me now, Princess. Let's go find your brother and end this thing. Grabbing the handles of the life support unit, Frank plunged into the labyrinthine network of tunnels, the sounds of battle fading behind them as they ventured deeper into the unknown. Frank and Freya emerged from the tunnels, the towering form of Prince Odin's command ship looming before them. As they approached, the air crackled with energy as an Eliani patrol materialized, weapons leveled at the pair. Halt! Drop your weapons! Barked Commander Zoran, his eyes narrowed with deadly intent. Frank and Freya exchanged a glance, their hands tightening on their weapons. They had come too far to surrender now. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as the two sides opened fire, Frank and Freya diving for cover behind a shattered wall. Frank grunted in pain as a bolt grazed his shoulder, searing through his armor. Freya's eyes flashed with anger as she saw Frank's wound. She leapt from cover, her own weapon spitting plasma at her former comrades. Her movements were a blur as she dodged and weaved, taking down Eliani soldiers with ruthless efficiency. Zoran snarled with rage, ordering his troops to focus fire on Freya. But the princess was too quick, too skilled. She danced through the hail of plasma, her weapon never wavering as she cut down the patrol one by one. As the last soldier fell, Zoran turned to flee, but not before Freya's shot took him in the leg, sending him sprawling. He dragged himself away, disappearing into the shadows to report to Odin. Frank staggered to his feet, clutching his wounded shoulder. Freya, we have to move. Odin knows we're coming now. Freya nodded grimly, supporting Frank as they limped towards the command ship. As they approached, the massive doors hissed open, revealing the imposing figure of Prince Odin himself, flanked by a squad of elite guards. Sister, Odin spat, his voice dripping with contempt. You dare betray your own people for this human? Freya stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. Brother, this war must end. Too many have died on both sides. We have a chance for peace, but only if we... Peace? Odin roared. With the Terrans who slaughtered our people, who dared to lay hands on my own sister, there can be no peace, only vengeance. He turned to his guards, his face twisted with rage. Seize them. They will stand trial for their crimes, and then they will die as an example to all who would defy the Eliani. Frank and Freya fought, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. The guards wrenched their weapons away, slamming them to their knees before Odin. As the guards dragged them away to the brig, Frank and Freya's eyes met, despair etched on their faces. They had risked everything for a chance at peace, but now it seemed their sacrifice had been for nothing. In the cells, Freya slumped against the wall, her head in her hands. I'm sorry, Frank, I thought I could reason with him, make him see... Frank reached through the bars, his hand finding hers. You tried, Freya. That's more than most would have done. We have to believe that it meant something. Unbeknownst to them, even as they sat in their cells awaiting execution, their actions were already rippling across the galaxy, whispers of the human soldier and the Eliani princess who had dared to bridge the gap between their species to fight for peace in the face of overwhelming odds. On the UEF worlds, cries for an end to the war grew louder, as people took to the streets to demand their leaders seek a diplomatic solution. And among the Eliani, murmurs of discontent with Odin's rule began to spread, as those who had lost loved ones to the conflict questioned the need for more bloodshed. The stage was set for a reckoning, as both sides teetered on the brink of change, and at the center of it all two unlikely allies, bound by a shared hope for a better future, even as they faced their darkest hour. The guards arrived, dragging Frank and Freya from their cells roughly. They were brought before a massive crowd of Eliani soldiers and citizens, Odin standing above them on a raised dais. Behold, Odin's voice boomed out, the traitors who would see our great species brought low, who would have us bow before the Terran scum. The crowd roared, A mix of bloodthirsty cheers and shocked gasps at the sight of the once-proud princess brought low. Frank struggled against his bonds, his eyes locked on Freya's battered form. Odin raised his hand, the crowd falling silent. He opened his mouth to pronounce their sentence, but the words never came. A deafening explosion rocked the assembly, smoke and debris raining down. Eliani soldiers and citizens alike screamed and scattered as a hail of blaster fire erupted from the shadows. "For the resistance!" a familiar voice bellowed. Captain Jack Hawkins charged into the fray, his team at his back, now joined by a ragtag force of UEF and Eliani defectors. They clashed with Odin's loyalists in a brutal melee, the air thick with the scent of blood and ozone. In the chaos, Frank wrenched free of his captors, snatching a fallen blaster. He whirled, firing point-blank into the guard reaching for Freya. "Let's move!" he barked. Freya surged to her feet, scooping up a weapon of her own. Side by side, they fought their way through the battle, blasting a path toward Odin's command ship. They burst onto the bridge, weapons leveled, and froze. Prince Odin stood before them, his face a mask of pure rage. At his side, Commander Zoran grinned, his own weapon trained on Freya. "You've taken everything from me," Odin snarled at Frank. "My honor, my sister, my chance at victory, but now I will have my revenge." He lunged, a gleaming blade in hand. Frank met him head-on, grappling for control of the knife. They crashed across the bridge, consoles sparking and shattering under their furious struggle. Freya and Zoran circled each other warily, blades flashing in a deadly dance. Zoran pressed his attack, driving Freya back with sheer brute force. Frank cried out as Odin's blade found flesh, searing pain lancing through his side. He staggered, blood seeping between his fingers, and in that moment he saw Zoran's sword arcing toward his unprotected back. "No!" Freya's scream cut through the clash of battle. She hurled herself forward, shoving Frank aside, and gasped as Zoran's blade punched through her chest. Time seemed to slow. Freya crumpled to the deck, her lifeblood pooling beneath her. Zoran stood over her, his face a mix of shock and triumph. Something snapped in Frank. He roared, a sound of pure anguish and fury, and launched himself at Zoran. His first blow shattered the Eliani's blade. His second caved in Zoran's face, hurling his broken corpse across the bridge. Frank whirled on Odin, murder in his eyes. The prince scrambled back, his arrogance replaced by fear. Frank's hand closed around Odin's throat, hoisting him into the air. Every instinct screamed at him to squeeze, to crush the life from this monster who had taken everything from him. But as he stared into Odin's terrified eyes, he saw Freya's blood on his hands. This isn't what she would have wanted. With a cry of disgust, he hurled Odin to the ground. "Look," Frank snarled, pointing to where Freya lay crumpled and still. "Look what your pride has wrought. Her blood is on your hands." Odin crawled to his sister's side, cradling her limp form, his face a mask of grief and horror. Around them the battle raged on, but for Frank, the world had narrowed to the cooling body in his arms. "Freya, please," he whispered, brushing her hair from her face. "Don't go, don't leave me." But her eyes remained closed, her chest still. A single tear traced down Frank's cheek as he pressed a final kiss to her brow. In the aftermath of the battle, a tenuous ceasefire took hold. Both sides, shattered by the cost of their conflict, agreed to talks, to find a path forward that didn't lead to more graves. But even as the first fragile seeds of peace took root, Frank found no solace. He walked away from the military, his medals and commendations hollow comforts. Instead, he threw himself into building bridges, into healing the wounds between their peoples that had festered for so long. It was what Freya would have done, what she died trying to achieve. Years later, Frank stood on a windswept cliff, looking out over the ruins of a city that had once been a shining jewel of two civilizations. Now, it stood as a memorial, a reminder of all they had lost and all they had to gain. He clutched Freya's medallion, the metal long since warmed by his skin. "I miss you," he whispered to the wind, "every day, but I won't let your sacrifice be in vain. I'll keep fighting for both our peoples, until my last breath." He turned his eyes to the stars, to the glimmers of ships, human and Eliani, streaking across the sky. A future, bought with blood and sorrow, but a future nonetheless. One where perhaps the children of Earth and Elia could stand side by side, not as enemies but as family, as he had with Freya for one brief, shining moment amidst the darkness of war. It was a dream worth fighting for, and fight he would until the stars themselves burned cold. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.